But it's a kind of fantasy. But I just wanted to hear this because I know it's because of people.
I'm a hey. So people have like PhDs or education.
What's philosophy? Is there some philosophy?
Almost not
Texas.
Last check is the dean's office, you know.
Yeah, like they're on. Yeah. Can you see or like? That'll show me how many viewers you have. Yeah, I'm gonna click on this one. Not that I can like.
Like DMA. That is actually so you're right, it doesn't exist in the same way.
Oh, I remember that discussion.
Yeah.
They still have the
Yeah, it's an education, it's a doctorate in advanced education. But I think NYU's is a doctorate in advanced studies.
well, there's that. But it was an education. It's amazing that it's very hard then study on the doctorate level.
It's just such a get stuff. National nation.
I've got that's what I wanted to talk about.
Into making it happen. You have to be able to say
yeah, but I think they're very happy with that. Funny shape without wall there, but still. Very good. To be inspiring.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Tara Willis. I'm the program associate here at Movement Research. And I'm just going to start off by saying a couple of housekeeping things. The elevators here at Gibney close at 8, so if you do feel like you need to use the elevator as opposed to the stairs, please think about heading out around 7:45 to make sure you have time for that. Also, other housekeeping things. Oh, we're going to be audio recording and also live streaming tonight, which is exciting and very new, and we've got a lot of people at universities tuning in and a lot of other folks who couldn't be here tonight. Also, just like that expands the audience that gets to be present for this. The audio recording is podcasted afterwards. It's a free podcast, great resource for people who couldn't be here in person to listen to. That said, please do speak up if you ask a question. You can feel free to say your name if you want, but do speak up. And it's warm in here, so we may open the windows and it'll get even louder. So just bear that in mind. We will also be holding, our beautiful intern, Lily, will be holding this beautiful picture at the door at the end of the evening. So if you are able to give any amount, 50 cents, $200, whatever you have in your pockets that you're willing to give to support this free program is super appreciated so it can continue to exist. Studies project events at Movement Research are an opportunity to open discourse in the community. They happen in more traditional panel discussions through a range of different formats, performances, all kinds of stuff. And really they're about creating a platform for these kinds of conversations. And there's going to be more studies projects coming up this spring. They are generally always here at Gibney, 6 p.m., first Tuesday of the month. So please take a look at our calendar. Is on the table over there if you don't have one already, to see what else we have coming up, some really great events. Also on that table is our beautiful Movement Research Friends bookmark. So feel free to pick one of those up. You can become a friend of Movement Research for as little as $10. We'll send you a song and a music video, and you'll get invited to parties and all sorts of little perks. Yes, we do that. There's also some free performance journals, the most recent 3 of them, PJ 41, 42, and 43, and some for sale for $5 over there, some back issues that are really awesome. You can also sign up for a subscription if you don't already subscribe. Last but not least, tote bags. Yvonne Meyer drew this fantastic set of creatures, so please feel free to pick that up, also $5. And a couple of other things over there, you can check it out afterwards. I think that's it, so without further ado,
Just also want to take this moment to thank Gibney Dance Center, which provides the space for these events to take place free of charge. So.
Yeah, thank you. And help with setup. Great job.
Awesome, yes.
Please turn off your phones if you haven't thought of it already. And this particular studies project was conceptualized by our critical correspondence editors, Nicole, Daunic, and Abigail, Levine, right here in matching outfits on the right. So without further ado, they will introduce our panelists and the event itself. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nicole, Daunic. Thank you all very much for coming today. We look forward to getting a better sense of who's in our audience this evening and introducing our panel. But first I wanted to just give a sense of this conversation and what it's emerged out of.
Can you speak a little louder?
Okay. That's what they all say. And forgive me for reading, but I'm not so practiced at the art of introductions. Since 2009, when Maura Donohue was a guest editor at the University Project, we've slowly chipped away at the changing relationship between university dance programs and the field or fields of dance, featuring interviews with most recently Jan Burkert of the University of Illinois, who spoke about community as curriculum, Simon Dove and Karen Shoup, who spoke about their shifting their curriculum at Arizona State University to better prepare students to engage the changing landscape of dance, globally, practically, and socially, and Brenda Dixon-Gottschalk, who spoke about the Coalition for Days Foreign Scholars Moving, a nationwide network of support organized to assist Black scholars who have encountered racism in their attempts to attain degrees, tenure, diversity, etc. within U.S. university dance programs. Evolving dance pedagogies is a huge, complex topic, made more so by the fact that neither university dance programs nor the field of dance are stable things. As Patricia rightly pointed out in an email thread leading up to this conversation, the discussion shifts depending on whether we are talking about public or private universities, a conservatory or a liberal arts program, undergraduate or graduate level degrees, a dance department or a dance program attached to a larger department. Similarly, what exactly is the field of dance and according to whom? What biases, geographical, aesthetic, social, political, already potentially delimit the discussion we will have tonight? And how do those seated around the imaginary table account for this in the work they do? I say this so we can share an awareness and sensitivity to this going on in the discussion and to provide an opening for those who sense some blind spots in the discussion to please say so. Given this, I'm almost done. We'd like to take the opportunity of having these distinguished guests to engage in a conversation assessing how the field of dance is changing in various ways and how universities can change to support and reflect these shifts. And I'll hand it over to Abigail.
So we've started out having a spirited virtual conversation that hopefully will get livelier and hopefully continue beyond this evening. And have noted that we could stall on just sort of pointing to all the different problems that we face in these different relationships and institutions and bureaucracies, et cetera. But we are going to go for a more utopic attempt at visioning the future and the difficulty of that being how do we train people for practices and creative field, creative production that we don't yet know what it is. So that's our challenge. Thank you to Movement Research and to the interns, both the critical correspondence interns and Movement Research interns for making this happen, and of course to our panelists who will introduce themselves. I come to this having gone to City Public School Conservatory here in New York, and then a liberal arts dance program where I did not major in dance, and then finally a sort of hybrid degree at NYU in practice-based performance studies. Practicing as an artist, thinking that starting to guest at universities, hoping one day to have that as place both to share my knowledge as an artist and have a little more stability in my practical survival. And so we all have very complex relations to these two interacting parts of our field. And so there was some interest in sort of knowing from the audience how you primarily identify, not that any of these has to be hard and fast, but artist, educator, student, other relationship to dance. So if people feel comfortable, if you primarily identify as an artist of some sort, might you raise your hand? Great. If you primarily identify as an educator of dance or otherwise, would you raise your hand? If you primarily identify as someone who relates to dance in some other way, and what about as students? Anyone? Okay. And then how about people who feel like multiple ones of these categories apply to them? Okay. So that's who we're talking to. So maybe we'll head down this way and do. Anyone who would like to begin just introducing yourself and a couple of the most pressing questions or matters for you.
I'm Maura Donohue, and I was just thinking where I studied. I mean, I studied when I was younger in private studios, but I was an anthropology and dance double major in a private liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, Smith College, and I was one of two dance majors. And the other dance major got pregnant and left. So I had a very sort of one-on-one relationship with all of the faculty. And now I teach at Hunter College in the City University of New York system, where we have 100 and, David, how many do we have? 150 majors. We have 29 choreographing seniors, essentially. And so my experience is very different from the one in which I teach in. And so that's always a kind of interesting kind of clash moment for me, which is my own personal experience, and then what I'm sort of negotiating through. In between that, I have been in New York since '94 and have been choreographing. And after having 2 kids and needing to get a job that had things like healthcare associated with it, went back and did my MFA, again at Smith. And so I entered academia in a full-time capacity in '08. Previous to that, I had been teaching as an adjunct in the 5 colleges up there and had spent a semester as a visiting artist. So it sort of glimpsed the full-time landscape, but really didn't understand it. And that was the position I was in when I was editing the university project for Correspondence in '08. So a newcomer to the landscape of academia as this kind of career pursuit. And so I was very excited when this opportunity and the chance to talk to Jen Urquhart, actually, I think it was just posted today, so there was a great interview there. But to return to this conversation after a year at Queens College and then the past 5 years at Hunter, really being immersed in a very constant practice of teaching and still making work and writing and raising 2 children and living in New York City. And so I think that for me, the pressing questions are how the systems can help this idea of a teacher practitioner. How do we really make that important, and how do you help the system understand that that is important? And then how do you also help maybe the existing leaderships understand that that is relevant and that that's actually important to help the students in understanding how they might be able to move forward. A lot of them don't really understand what a life in dance could even look like. And so, and I feel like I bring a lot of different ways in which I'm engaged in dance. And so for me, it's finding that way to present a possibility of multiplicities of dance entries and life practices. Most pressing question. There's the sort of practitioner question for me. And then there's, in my particular school, as a urban campus public school, we have a very racially, culturally, socioeconomically diverse student body. And their exposure levels, even if it's in Manhattan, to to the movement research community is extremely minimal when they arrive at school. So how do I respect and help build a program that acknowledges the enormous amount of information that these students already have from their life experiences in dance, and also introduce them to ways of thinking about dance that have been very, that they're completely unaware of. So that's, for me, that's actually really pressing, constant, daily challenge.
Hi, I'm Mariah Maloney, and I'm really happy to be here tonight. I'm really interested in what all of us collectively will sort of unearth, and questions that will come up. I think through gathering like this, we're getting smarter than all the emails and internet. I mean, it's so wonderful we have that, but something about being in the room with each other, there's another intelligence that comes forward. So I'm really happy to be here in person. My background is sort of very step-by-step, I realize, even though I don't see myself as the sort of person that has this step-by-step plan, but I grew up in Alaska. I danced up there with the lady that moved to Alaska and because her husband was a bush pilot, and she ended up teaching dance. She was a dancer and wanted to dance, so I learned from a woman that was from California. Went to SUNY Purchase and got a BFA in dance, moved to New York City and danced for 2.5 years, got Patricia Brown's company, left Trisha Brown after 8 years, freelanced for 2.5 years, got my MFA through the Hollins program, and then guest artist like a crazy lady for 6 years consecutively, and then decided probably good to be in one spot. So I had these chapters, and now I'm in the 5th year of a full-time tenure track position at the State University of New York, Brockport. If you don't know where Brockport is, just find the map of New York State and just go like this. And then when you get to where you can't even believe the state still exists, keep going. And just before all the lakes, that's Brockport. I say this because I started there as a guest in 2006, and I was earning my MFA, and this position came up, and they said, you need to teach ballet to dance majors. And even though I had had great teachers, Janet Panetta, the Corvinos, I was like, no, you have to teach ballet now. So I just said, no, I'm not doing it. And then the universe basically said, you're going to do it. So I did it. And I was like, where is Brockport anyway? Upstate New York, it's got to be like, 2 hours. Anyway, so I'm in, ADF, it's hot, and I'm in this room, and I'm like, I'm going where? Anyway, that's where I live, that's where I work full time. I come to New York a lot. I'm very active with the Patricia Brown Company as a, I'm teaching for the company. I'm sometimes studying work for the company. I'm so in love with the company's work. I love Tricia's work. So my teaching is both at a university with BFA, BS, BAs, MFAs, MAs, and then professional dancers or the population that come to Trisha Brown's workshops. A lot of times we have international professional dancers, sometimes college students. But we were talking this afternoon, and we also shared a bunch of emails, and I'm 6 months ago, we sat down and had a discussion about how is it changing? Like, the world is changing, the field of dance is changing, the education system is changing, but my question is, who are the teachers at the university? What are they doing outside of that container? And the title of this panel, or this topic, Evolving Dance Pedagogies, my first thought is the faculty are evolving. And so the curriculums need to have a way to be expandable and changeable without losing their clarity of purpose. And so I don't really have any answers, but I have a lot of questions about both my longevity as an artist and an educator, and also about my students' most optimal outcomes and achievement of their goals and their dreams, and the clarity of, well, what is it that they might want to do? And maybe they don't know yet, but maybe they do know. And then the other question I have is, who's making the choreography that they may do dance eventually, or are they going to be the choreographers? And what are the sorts of things that they need to experience and have access to, or questions they need to have while they're still in university? And what I do right now is I just say, go and explore everything you can. Go to the festivals, go to New York, go to Melt, go to Europe. And I encourage all of my students, whether they're grad or undergrad, to have as much conversation and access as they can with lots of different types of people, different types of arts, so that there's more possible in how they're thinking about dance. And I'm even not wanting to name it. The name modern dance just, well, I'm really inspired by so much modern dance, but that name itself, I'm not using that name in my practice. So I'm going to stop because I could keep going. But my question is, what is it that the faculty that are at these universities, how are they evolving? Are they evolving? And how does their practice get supported? And then number two, the students, what questions do they need to be asking to gain the most they can and to have a really fruitful life in school and out of school? So I'm wondering what this answers might be.
I think that's about 2.5 months of conference with this material that they brought up. So I'm going to be real quick. My name is Patricia Hoffbauer, and I'm from Brazil. I came here 35 years ago to go to school, and I went to NYU, a very traditional conservatory. And I had studied with people in Brazil who had been part of Judson, and I was very sort of informed by that. But when I came to NYU, I was very surprised at how the teaching, the curriculum was so, it was part of a sort of a past, I would say an American past, that I didn't expect, because I thought, well, if this happened in the 60s, I'm in the 80s, and therefore the ways in which the techniques and the thinking about dance would sort of reflect the time and where I was, the East Village, etc. And it was none of that. And so I was very always looking for a way in which I could find, I don't know, conversation, dialogue, or something that was outside of training the body. Not that I don't like my body, or that I don't think my body. I was telling June that everybody thinks I look like Tanaquil Leclerc. But I was always very interested in how to break, how is it that we could find a space to create work that wasn't constantly using a kind of model that had been established in the sort of early 20th century. And it wasn't until I became old that I went back to graduate school, and I didn't want to do an MFA, not that I don't think you did a great thing, because I don't have a job. I'm an adjunct. And so but I wanted to study something outside of the conservatory. So I did a degree in women's studies, which was a terrible thing to do, because now I have 2 kids, I have no job. I work I have no health insurance. I have, several jobs that I have to do all the time. So, but I think what it's given me, the difference between, I think, I have nothing to offer, but just the difference is that I teach at a hugely rich school in a very impoverished department. So, not that, I teach at Hunter College with Maura, and I teach at Princeton. And I think that these are such opposite paradigms that perhaps that would be sort of interesting to talk about. But I started teaching when I graduated from CUNY. I did women's studies at the Graduate Center, and I was interested in figuring out a course that would address sort of the thinking about dance, gender. I started making work in New York in the 80s. It was very much about identity politics, and I wanted to continue discussing these issues and that they wouldn't be archived as some kind of the 80s moment. And so I created a course that I've been teaching for the last 15 years. And it's about thinking about history in dance, outside of dance, and how these different disciplines, anthropology, cinema studies, dance, how do they relate and how they can inform the student to think about making work differently, that we don't just get in this sort of conservatory mode of steps and creating a kind of, mimicry of the classroom. And I'm completely unsuccessful, but I still doing it. And I think, some of my students are great, they're very smart, and I think eventually, it's not gonna happen now, but eventually I think people will change, and I think it's the conversation is how do we inform and I don't know, empower, strengthen our students' voices so that they believe that doing X, Y, or Z is just as important as doing glissade, pas de bourrée, exercise on 6. That these things are not hierarchically posed for them as kind of options that, so that's my story. Oh, and in terms of a question, I think it's yes, what are we preparing the students? What do we, when we confront students in liberal arts programs who are interested in acquiring this sort of fictional body, they want to be white, thin and something, what do we say as faculty? How do we, like Maura was saying, you support the student and yet you want to open up the world in front of them without destroying their fantasy or expectation. So that's something I think about constantly.
Hi, I'm Neil Greenberg. I've had a lot of experience that I didn't expect I was going to get when I set out, but I've had a lot of experience at universities. I've taught at conservatories, I taught at Purchase College for 20 years. I was out of the Cunningham Company a year when they needed somebody to teach Cunningham technique, and that's what they thought they were getting when they hired me. And I started doing that, and I was very quickly continuing my education and studying movement research faculty in New York, and started bringing that into my classes there. So I've been in a conservatory and been in conflict with the conservatory. I also taught at Sarah Lawrence sometimes, Sarah Lawrence College, really different liberal arts program. I felt definitely like I was on a faculty that I could have a discourse with, a really serious discourse. That was great. I've taught at University of California, Riverside. That was after I went back to get my BA and then MFA. But I did both in my 40s. And I got both of those in my 40s. Although I got the MFA at Sarah Lawrence and did mostly queer studies with Julie Abraham there. So that's mostly what I did there. But also dance studies, and they ended up giving me an MFA so that I could get a full-time job. I taught at the University of California, Riverside, so that's a public institution. It's a BA program with an MFA and a PhD program, although I didn't have that much to do with the PhD program. But that was like a real eye-opener, like going to the West Coast, being in such a diverse population, but so differently diverse than the New York diversity. That did exist at Purchase to some extent, but just a really different diversity. And that's the first time that I really felt like, oh my God, what I want, what I can give them, they don't want, and what they want, I can't give them. So that was an eye opener. Like to be confronted with really different student populations, and my whole definition of what the field is was not even on their radar. Some of the students, and so that was a big question. And then I came back to New York. I've had a job for the past, this is my 4th year teaching at Eugene Lang College, which is the undergraduate college of the New School. So it's the more traditional liberal arts undergraduate, 4-year, straight out of high school type college of the New School. And I'm in a program there. It is a BA program. It's a liberal arts program. It's a small program with limited course allotments. But I'm blessed in that there's so much chaos at that school that you can get things done. Complete opposite of the bureaucracy of University of California, Riverside, where to make the changes that my colleague, I'm also blessed because I work with a great colleague, Danielle Goldman, who is a dancer, so an embodied scholar. So she's a PhD from NYU in performance studies and has written on improvisation and other things, but that's another thing for me to talk about is dance scholarship, like the critical dance studies, and how it can start to become very bifurcated from the practice, and that's why I'm so happy to be working with Danielle, because there's no separation. It's grounded. The looking at dance is grounded from experience. But geez, so that's my experience, and I went to Juilliard for less than a year before I started dancing professionally. So so the conservatory, one thing that I often think about and note is that conservatory has the word conserve in it, and it does seem very much about conserving and preserving the values of culture, and the values. So what culture And who's deciding what values? But those questions don't seem to be asked at a conservatory. At the conservatories where what culture doesn't seem to be asked. And there is such a thing at a conservatory called technique with a capital T, and it does mean one thing. And I'm being vastly reductive here, but on one end of the spectrum, if there were this conservatory that was that reductive, it would have one thing. It would have one notion of what virtuosity is. And it would be a part of an economic system that feeds dance companies that hopefully perform north of 14th Street. Right? There was a professor who used to say, do you want to be downtown dancer? No, you want to be uptown dancer. That kind of thing. So, this kind of thing did exist in the world. I think still does. I'm not saying the conservatories are like this now. I already know that Purchase is already very different since I left. That's my sense of things there. But, my questions, I'm trying to think if there's, so if we're preparing students for a changing field, I'm trying to think how is the field changing? So those are some of the questions, how is the field changing? I definitely see a sea change in the way dance is taught in conservatories, in liberal arts programs, away from, the Grahams and the Lumones and the Cunninghams defending the ramparts, and the various, the ballet, and all of the different ramparts being defended. I definitely see that model, it seems like most people are not interested in that and are running away from that with their hands above their heads. I am. And, I think we are. And instead, but then in the questioning of things, how do you still keep something? How do you actually present some material in such a way that it can still be questioned and does not have to be accepted as received wisdom, but can be tried. So that's one thing. I see a sea change away from front-loading information, this is the information you need, to the possibilities, the conflicts in the field approach, or the advanced possibilities in the field. There are all these possibilities. So with the students who come in and they have their experiences, their varied experiences, but they're their own and they're small compared to what we hope it might be. So how, I do see the process as opening the possibilities, not taking away the initial possibilities. Right. There's a reading that I use a lot about subject-object, moving from what is subject to what is something that we are had by, it's the water in which we swim, to something that we can be in relationship with and have, that's seeing that as almost as what an educational shift is, where something moves from subject to object. But it doesn't mean, so with the traditions and all of that, so somebody asked in our earlier conversation, does this mean that we completely reject the earlier notions of virtuosity? And do we not, are we going to discourage people from learning how to do, something they want to do when they come in, like a pirouette or a jump, and it's how to just move it from subject, that's what it has to be, to that's what it can be too. Right?